Okay, welcome back. We are now on to item 4.1. This is a motion to amend the resolution. I'm going to go to our corporate officer to talk briefly about the procedure with this particular item, as it's quite detailed.
Thank you, Melissa Bumbluto, Corporate Officer. So this process is called a notice of motion to amend something previously adopted. And the purpose of this process is to consider a specific amendment to a previously adopted motion. In this case, notice was posted on July 15th on the regular business meeting to consider removing bullet point 2II, which will require a majority vote of council if council chooses to consider the amendment as it's presented. If council deviates from the posted notice of motion and proposes another or an alternate amendment, a 2/3 vote is required on the amendment and on the main motion as amended. If council votes down the amendment as presented on the agenda, a vote on the main motion is not required and the original motion from July 15th stands. Staff suggest that if they have if council has questions of clarification that are appropriate for staff to address, that those questions are asked prior to council moving and seconding any form of amendment. That's all I have. I'm happy to answer questions before this process gets underway or as it's flowing as well. Thanks.
Okay, so maybe we'll just start with any questions on the process, and then we will talk about the topic itself. So I'm not seeing any hands. Oh, go ahead, Councillor Stoner.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, could staff just speak to what happens if somebody wants to make an amendment on the notice of motion as presented?
Yes, so you're referring to the proposed amendment for consideration? Okay, so if you choose to change the proposed amendment for consideration in any form, that's where the 2/3 vote comes into play. So in that case, we'll treat it exactly like we would an amendment and then a main motion as amended in a regular council meeting. The only change is that rather than a majority vote, where we wade into the 2/3 vote, which would be 5 out of 7.
Councillor Pettingill, was that your hand? No. Okay. If there are questions in the process throughout, I do want we'll have those addressed. And just remember that we'd have the discussion, any discussion that's needed prior to moving will make moving of the motion will make it far easier to get the answers. So maybe I'll just start briefly. I brought this forward to touch base with council and see if how critical that one piece was, as we had. I felt that when we made the motion, the original motion, I think there may have been different expectations around the timeline, and it wasn't for it coming back, and it wasn't a question that myself or anyone around the table asked to understand what delay would be involved in getting this item back. So this was an opportunity to bring it back, to have that conversation and potentially find a way to move forward. As as far as expectation goes, I didn't expect it to take for the delay to be as substantial as it ended up being, as we find ourselves here. So that's why we're here, and this is a path that we found that could move this forward should we see fit. And if not, we can perhaps take another course or stay the course with our original direction. Just want to make sure that that's an intentional decision by council. So any questions for our staff at this point? Go ahead, Councillor Pettingill.
So if we were to support what's proposed, does that mean there's no multi-use path planned as part of this, or what happens with a multi-use path, or how does that happen?
Through the mayor, no, if this motion passes, it would just be what was presented previously, where a cash contribution in the amount of $170,000 would be provided towards that path, which was the original land development agreement amendment that was presented the last time this was at council.
From memory, if it can help, is the question was around how that number was arrived at. So there was questions around more details about the multi-use path to justify the dollar value is my recollection. So what was proposed at the previous meeting would stand. So this isn't about yes or no to a path. It's about that further deeper layer of information than we had originally. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, as being the original mover of the motion from June 3rd, the intention was to get an understanding of what the delta was between the 170,000 and what the cost of the actual multi-use path was going to be. In the council report, or the report to council from June 3rd, it said that there was an existing cost estimate for the full multi-use path that the developer had done, and that this $170,000 was deemed a reasonable contribution, but without that other number, it was hard to justify what that looked like. And so I'm just curious to staff, like, do we know what the total cost of the multi-use path will be and what the delta would be that we would then be covering through CAC or DCCs or some other cost?
Through the mayor, not at this time. That work is still ongoing with the engineering department. We haven't been able to arrive or obtain that information, which is why it hasn't come back to council yet.
Can I just clarify, the previous staff report said that estimate had been completed. And so I'm just curious why we wouldn't then have that number.
Through the mayor, well, with respect to how it's paid for is still being determined because there's grant funding associated with this project and other things that haven't been finalized at this time. So staff are still working to make sure that we have the most accurate numbers when we bring this back to council, and it's still with the engineering department at this time.
Okay. Councillor Hamilton.
I'd like to understand why it's important, why it is important and to whom it is important that this motion get amended. What is this information, this review of costs? What is this blocking?
I think, sorry, I might ask, yeah, it feels like a question for me, in that, in looking at this, as I said, it's sort of in my opening remarks on this, I felt that that with the motion that was passed, there was an expectation, perhaps of the group that wasn't articulated, that it would come back pretty quick. As we heard from Councillor Stoner, there was an assumption that the information was more readily available. So I want to make sure that we're making decisions, intentionally. And if this piece of information is mission critical to the majority of council and having a delay till we receive it and make a decision from there, then that's fine. I don't feel that was intentional the first time, because I think it's gone longer. I also think that this project is a big project, a complex project. It also is the first project that had units going to the housing authority, and I have a challenge with the units going to the housing authority really being the trigger for a stumbling block for the project. I think this is something that we want to encourage in our policy, and I don't want to give undue delay because of that particular piece. So I want to make sure that we're intentional. If council reinforces the original decision, then that's fine. I do think it's worth reconsideration given the complexity involved here and the housing units going to the housing society. I don't want that to be a complication. I would like that to be something that the development community continues to sort of buy into that program. as well. So that's my justification for having the discussion today.
So do I understand clearly then? So my understanding of your response is that reviewing the costs of this multi-use path is putting the affordable housing units in jeopardy?
I think any delays, delays in development process put projects at risk. So potentially that's a risk here if, and it's something we need to be, I think, aware of as whether we refer something back to staff or give a first reading with conditions or whatever, that it is a delay. And this project's been through sort of many iterations, and this is a relatively, or it's an adjustment versus rezoning, say, that started from a blanker canvas. So so again, I wanted to make sure that we're intentionally making these decisions, but delays do, we know in our own projects that delays cost money, and ultimately delays do put projects at risk. I haven't heard, I don't know what that exactly that means in this context, but yes, delays do put things at risk. I'll go around. I'll come back to you. Go ahead, Councilor Pengel.
Yeah, so two questions, and I just would like to have my memory refreshed. What was in the original agreement? Like when this last came to us, we were trying to accommodate some changes that had happened in the project. Were the original agreements, land development agreements, on that this project would cover the whole cost of the trail, and then to accommodate that, we're sort of lowering that and saying, well, we just ask for a portion, and we're trying to figure out if we're comfortable with that ratio. Is that sort of that was the issue that we were trying to address?
That was part of the issue. I'll go to staff to clarify further, but there was a long story and presentation that set it up, but I'll go back to
Yes,
Mr. Daly.
thanks, Mayor. Perhaps I will just give a very high-level summary of the previous land development agreement when it came. So when this was last presented, there were some challenges with the project with what was previously agreed kind of civil design. They were requested by the engineering department. The developer agreed to do these redesigns, which obviously incurred some costs. To kind of recognize that, staff worked with the developer to look at options for amending the land development agreement to still try and capture as much of the previously agreed upon amenities as possible. So we landed on rezoning to do a slight increase in the number of units that were permitted. It was 16. And then the timing of the units that were going to be donated to the Housing Society were going to be going from the second apartment building to the fourth apartment building, which would be the final one. That the improvements at the Legacy Ski Park be kind of all those funds be allocated towards a ski jump because the scope of that had increased from the original rezoning. And then rather than construct the multi-use path, which was what was originally agreed upon, to provide a cash contribution in the amount of $170,000, recognizing the challenges with the Fortis project going through there and the timing related to that. And the developer made the offer of $170,000 as a cash contribution towards that. So that was what was presented at the last council meeting.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question, it sounds like there's two things that are asked for in this new, or we're being asked to remove. One is an understanding of the total cost, and then the other is the funding sources. It sounds like we actually do know the total cost number. It's just the funding sources we're trying to nail down. And I'm wondering if we paused on this, moved on the next item, came back to it, if we could at least have an understanding of the cost piece, and maybe that gives us enough or more comfort to move forward, because then we've got half of the information that was asked for in this.
Is it sorry, is that accurate where we have half of the equation that we're working on, or is it more nebulous than that?
Through the mayor, the funding sources are what we're trying to nail down. The costs are still not finalized, but there is a general understanding, but trying to ensure that we have an accurate or 100% accuracy on both of those items is still being determined.
Okay. So we have we don't have an accurate cost is what I'm hearing at this point. We're closer there, but we don't have an accurate cost somewhere.
Yeah, I'm not, well, okay, I'm getting into.
That's okay. We can try to get all the questions answered. Sure, on this, yep.
Do we have a ballpark cost? Because we know, we do know that it is very difficult to project the cost of something 5 years from now, yet alone next year, yet alone 10 years from now. Do we have a ballpark based on perhaps other multi-use paths that we've built in the district?
Through the mayor, I would say yes, there's a ballpark, but I don't want to speak on behalf of engineering. But I think there is a ballpark. Nailing down when and how it gets paid for is what staff are working through trying to determine.
Okay. Sorry, just conferring with staff. I've asked for a timeout to discuss. I do. So before we make before a motion, I'd like to take that opportunity, but let's keep going with some questions just to make sure that we don't need to do to attempt to avoid needing to do multiple times out. So we'll get some more information on this piece. Go to you, Councillor Stoner. You're next to my speakers list.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, I think just in advance the timeout, it would be helpful for me to understand. I think what I was trying and appreciate the language in my previous motion was around bringing back a full plan for construction and funding sources. What I am really curious about is kind of the order of magnitude cost estimate for the multi-use path to better contextualize the $170,000 contribution. So is that half of the cost? Like how much are we then taking on as a district to not be doing the full final construction is the piece of information that I feel like I need to be able to inform this decision. And if that really isn't available at this time, then it would be helpful to hear that from staff. But if that is available, then that would be also really great because then I think we could advance readings. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions before we take a quick recess for staff to confer? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I just sort of follow up to that. It's not as clear to me why the funding sources are important, maybe just in terms of how long we think it'll take us to fill the gap. But I'm just wanting to understand from my colleagues if the funding sources is the sticking point or if it's really that sort of sense of the total cost.
Yeah, I think one point is that the funding sources are important because we put it in the motion. So that's why that's there, and we're receiving that answer because that was the direction we provided. As to, we're hearing that is of lesser importance, I think, from the last comments of this versus the general cost and what's left. And so, but I think that is a question for colleagues. Does that sum up generally what you said there, Councillor Stoner?
I think it's helpful to know like what the list of potential funding sources would be, so we could try and estimate if this is going to go forward. Then is it going to take us 5 or 10 years to build that multi-use path? But I don't need it fully laid out. For me personally, I want to know whether this is going to cover 50% of the cost of the project, 10% of the cost of the project, or 100% of the cost. We know it's not 100%, but order of magnitude.
Yep. Thank you. Councillor Hamilton?
From my perspective, the importance of the funding source is if it goes into paid by the CAC fund, we know that fund has a lot of demands on it, and that will put this project into a long list of projects demanding this funding from the CAC pool. And so potentially putting the multi-use path on a much longer time scale than would be perhaps useful for this development.
Go ahead, Councillor Benningham.
And so can I follow up on that then? Is it sufficient for my colleague to know just that technically, because I think ultimately will be a council decision where this gets funded from if we go down this path to the degree of sort of legally available funding options. It'll be sort of a political decision. Is that the sort of information? Are you sort of wanting to know more about, oh, we have this much in this fund, and so there's these other fiscal reality constraints as well? Like, is it just the sort of technical?
For me, the core piece is how much is going to be how much funding are we going to need to find elsewhere? And of course, the decision on where that funding comes from becomes a budget conversation. But understanding how much funding we're putting on ourselves to have to come up with to complete this multi-use path is important.
Okay. If are there any other questions on any other aspect of this before we take our break? Okay, so we'll take a 10-minute recess, and we'll be back at 10:40. That's actually a 13-minute recess, but Okay, we are back. I will turn it back to staff for reply.
Thank you, Mayor. So the Capital Projects Department has a Class D cost estimate for the work in the amount of about $510,000. So the developer is proposing a cash contribution of $170,000 towards this project, and I will pass it to Ms. Glende to elaborate on the response.
Thank you through the mayor. In terms of funding sources, because staff have not yet done a detailed costing, it's not currently in the capital plan. So we don't have any idea at this point what would fund the shortfall.
Okay, follow-up questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I missed the number. What was the total number?
Approximately $507,000.
Generally, do we know what changes are coming to that area? We know the Fortis pipeline's coming through. Is there a widening or a bike path? Is there anything that changes as part of any of the works that are happening there outside of this multi-use path?
Through you, Mayor, I'm not comfortable responding to that question just because I don't know the scope of the Finch or the Fortis works that are ongoing. There are a couple of rezoning applications on that street that I've gone through that are proposing community amenity contributions. So that's about all I can kind of comment on that.
I'm going to extrapolate out that comment. Are you suggesting that the neighborhood plan has other other developments in line with the neighborhood plan would be asked could be asked to potentially contribute to bridging this gap? Is that one of the approaches that staff would take in a situation like this? If you don't want to speak specifically to the thing, if we have a project that's a third funded or something like that, and we're trying to get it across the line, is that something that would boil up the list as a potential? I don't want to get into too much speculation, but.
Thanks, Mayor Harford. I'm going to use your word speculation. When council is considering an item that is not yet funded, I would caution council to speculate on external methods of funding if it's not there and make a decision based on that. I would recommend you make your decision based on the fact that the district will be funding this shortfall, and that's the conservative view, and certainly staff will continue to look at other options in the interim. But at this point, I would say that the viewscape of this project is long-term, given it's not currently in the capital plan.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions, Councillor Pettingill?
So just on that point, there are other projects, as I recall, on the street. Some of them are doing some portion of active transit path. Would we expect a review of some of those contributions as well, given the Fortis works, or is this really unique and it's really because of that offsetting of the engineering changes we asked for? And that's why this one would be sort of a unique case that wouldn't necessarily apply to some of the other developments in their multi-use paths.
Through the mayor, I think I know the question that you're asking. This commitment to build the multi-use path was secured with this specific rezoning application. There's two other rezonings or I suppose three on this street, and they paid or are going to pay, if they haven't yet, a CAC, a portion of which the cash contribution is designated for active transportation. They weren't necessarily required to build a multi-use path or something like that.
Any other questions, council? Yeah, go ahead.
I was trying to find the numbers on this, but it may not be, and I understand it may not be readily at hand. It's not, exact numbers are not critical here, but how much parking variance was applied for and granted in this development as a whole? And the context of my question is that I view parking variance as, I completely understand people's desire to perhaps purchase and own and live in places without parking, but they do need another way to get to and from. And so I see parking variance and this multi-use path being related issues from the functionality of the space. So if you have an estimate on the total amount of parking that's been reduced in this development, that'd be appreciated.
Through the mayor. So the one, I guess, it's not necessarily a parking variance technically, because the original rezoning application always proposed kind of a reduced parking standard as per what would typically be contemplated in the zoning bylaw. Okay, let me just look here. There's more than one space provided per dwelling unit. If you give me a moment, I might be able to find the exact number. Okay, so for the apartment units, 261 parking spaces for all of the apartment dwelling units in the CD 101 zone would be provided. And there are 224 apartment dwelling units proposed. I would also highlight that this development provided parking for the affordable rental housing units, 32 of which those no longer require off-street parking. So that change was made after this development went through. So there's about not quite 60 more parking stalls than there are apartment dwelling units for that use.
So ballpark, we have about one stall per unit, including affordable units. Is that correct?
That's correct. It exceeds it. It's kind of challenging to do apples to apples because it's based on bedroom type. So.
Okay, council, any other questions? We have the ability to put the motion up on the screen. It's been quite prescriptive as to what we can do with this. So what I'm going to do is I'll move the proposed amendment. If there's a seconder. Seconded by Councillor French. Thank you. I think first, I've appreciated the discussion here today. I think that as we've heard from our staff in other developments, there's a cash contribution towards an amenity such as a multi-use path. I think this is taking given the complexity here and our role in delay and expense already with a redesign that was triggered, that was needed based on our actions as an organization. I think moving from this piece that we're looking to amend is about the multi-use path. I think there's ways to bridge the gap of the funding gap going forward to ensure that it still gets built. And I think that it's wholly appropriate to move from the approach of securing a built piece of infrastructure along a long stretch of road to a appropriate contribution towards that, council will still have a gap to figure out how to fund through any number of sources. But I think given the complexity here, it's an appropriate amount, and I'm comfortable to move ahead in this way. So I also feel that when I supported the original motion, I think that one of the takeaways for me here is also seeking clarity as to when we should expect things back when we're entertaining those motions, because I don't think that I think around the table we may have all different understandings or expectations as to when we were going to see this back. So I think it's important we keep this moving forward, seeing as the original rezoning happened quite some time ago, and there's been a long story of this, and part of that story are those affordable units for the housing society. So I will be voting in support Councillor Finch,
Very well articulated. Thank you.
thank you. Any other comments on this? Councillor Anderson?
Thank you. I'm also in support of the motion before us. I agree with the earlier comments of Mayor Herford. To quote from the report to Council on June 3rd, there have been significant costs for the civil redesign, that is for the stormwater infrastructure, and delays in issuance of the building permit for the AP1 apartment building, which also involved costs, if you like, for the developer. I think this is a hardship case. This developer is laying off people. This is a hardship case for, it's a hardship time for a number of developers, but including this particular project. With respect to the multi-use path trail, yes, it's great to have. However, I've lived in a neighborhood for a long time that's been waiting 17 years for a safe pedestrian trail to schools and shopping. So I put this in perspective. We've also discussed in other active transportation infrastructure in connection with the Pioneer development. I think I have a different view on this type of infrastructure, given my experience and needs around in the community. I'd like to put it in perspective. So I think that this is the right path forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stoner?
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, I will be supporting the motion on the floor and appreciate staff's additional insights onto the order of magnitude costs for the Class D estimate of the multi-use path. That is really helpful to me to better understand and contextualize what is actually being presented by the developer. And as previous council colleagues have mentioned, this project has been in the works for a long time and is not just an important priority from the Loggers East Neighborhood Plan, but it also meets 3 of our 4 criteria under our priority development application review process. And so it is achieving many goals that we have established as key priorities from this council and from our community, from affordable housing, market rental, childcare space, and so on. That being said, the multi-use path to me continues to be an important piece of this conversation. I don't think we want to make the mistake of encouraging new built neighborhoods to have to be without a safe way to get to places for 17 years. And so to me, having some sort of insight as to what the gap is on actually providing that multi-use path was important. I still think that's something that we can move forward as presented today in the amended motion. And we can just be cognizant about how we then need to step up as a community to make sure that that gap gets filled. And I think that there are good opportunities either through the rework of Finch Drive, through with Fortis, and or some of the money that has come through from the Fortis TUP laydown yard. There was $200,000 that was brought in this past year from that work. In due time. So I also don't want to encourage this development to do that work in advance of Fortis then tearing up Finch Drive again. So to me, this does make logical sense to consider this particular request an amendment to the community amenity contribution package as a whole. And I'm grateful to continue to see that the affordable units being brought back in an earlier phase will still be consideration in advance of second and third reading. So I'll support the motion on the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pettingill?
Just to double check this point, because it's just presented as moved last week, the notice of motion was identified. It's a straight 50-50 majority vote required.
Yep. That was just a clarification. Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks. I'm clearly torn on this. I see the value that this development is bringing. But reading from the original LDA, the developer shall obtain all necessary permits and design and construct the Finch Drive to Loggers Lane multi-use path westward extension. This is putting a multi-use path, which in my mind is a critical piece of the consideration to increase the density of any area and decrease the parking requirements. People need a way to get around. If they're not driving a car, they need a mechanism. They need places to be safely either riding their bikes or however they're getting where they're getting to Brendan Park for the hopefully frequent transit network that we'll be accessing and stopping at Brendan Park every 15 minutes. We need this infrastructure. We haven't been putting this infrastructure in for many decades because we have had we just drive a car to where we need to be. When we get into a denser environment, we can't do that. And so we need to put this type of transportation use at a higher priority. And so I am not going to be supporting the motion because I don't think that it's sensible for this mechanism for a multi-use path to be taken away, particularly in consideration of reduced parking requirements within a development zone.
Thank you. Any other comments before I call the question? Councillor Pettingill?
Yeah, I've been torn on this one too. I think the primary issue for me is actually, as I've spoken to before, the lack of understanding of the risk imposed by the pipeline. Were it not for that, I think I would be supportive of what's proposed here. I agree with my colleague fully that these trails are critical and we can't be building things where there's 17 years without a trail. And so that's exactly what we don't want to do. I think what's unique about this situation is we asked for, and I think with good reason, some engineering changes, but those had a significant cost. And I think because those were late in the day, we asked for something explicitly, had a change in understanding and asked for something quite expensive, different explicitly. And so I think we do have to bear some burden of that. I may have a follow-up question. I don't recall if we asked for a follow-up to just understand how we're adjusting our processes to try and catch these things better in the future. So I'll sort of leave that to after. So in general, I'm actually supportive of this. It is that sort of risk piece. And I think with an understanding of where we are in the votes and doing some tallying in my head, I don't think this is going to thwart the will of my colleagues, but I am wanting to vote this way to sort of underscore that point that I've been trying to make. So that's my rationale where I'm headed.
Thank you. Councillor Greenlaw?
Yeah, I also find this a difficult one. It seems like we're basically having to choose between a multi-use path and affordable housing to some level, to some degree. But just building on some of the comments that my colleagues have made, and I also share the concerns that Councillor Pettingill has about the risk of the pipeline. But maybe there's some way of when Fortis does rip up this area that we can possibly negotiate them rebuilding in a way that is conducive to having a multi-use path. I don't know if that's a possibility, but it is something that I would like to keep open. Again, it'd be nice to see some benefits of this project. Yeah, those are my comments. Thanks.
Thank you. So with that, I'll call the question. All in favor and opposed? Councillor Greenlaw, Hamilton, Pettingill opposed. Motion carries. Thank you.
Check.
Yep. Sorry. Okay. So now, and now we need to vote on the main motion as amended. So I will make that motion now. And Councillor French, you're seconding that. Anyone feel additional, there's opportunity for additional comments, although I think they're related, so I'm not going to go further. So then on the main motion as amended, all in favor and opposed, Councillor Pettingill opposes, Councillor Hamilton and Councillor Greenlaw opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. Councillor Pettingill.
Is this appropriate to ask, did we ask for a follow-up on how we are sort of reviewing our process on this? I don't recall.
I don't recall that as well, but I can follow up on that point. I don't know if we have that answer here. Okay. So next up, we have second and third reading of said same bylaw. Do you have anything to add at this time?
Yes, just that the proponent has agreed to move one of the unit donations. So the 2-bedroom, they've proposed to donate that with the AP3 apartment building, and then the 3-bedroom would remain in the AP4. So the original LDA amendment had the units going in the AP2 apartment building. The previous amendment that was presented in June had both of those units going to the final building, the AP4. And the proponent has come back and agreed to donate 1 unit in the AP3 and 1 unit in the AP4.
Okay. Council, any questions on this at this point? Seeing none, I will move the staff recommendation. There's a seconder. Councillor Stoner seconds. I think I do think this is as I mentioned in my earlier comments, this is a very been a long process with this proponent, and some of the things that were agreed upon originally ended up being for various reasons, including actually largely I would say even some pieces coming out of this from our organization. So I think that what we have here is a compromise, and it's not what we saw originally, but I think it largely lives up to the spirit of the original. And I do think that the earlier the better on these. So I'm happy to see some movement on the delivery of these units, the affordable units. So I'm happy to support this moving forward, and looking forward to getting some folks into particularly these units, and seeing the rest of this build out that supports that. So I'll be voting in favor. Other comments? Councillor Stoner.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. Appreciate the update and staff's ongoing work with the proponent to try and come to some agreement here. I do think it is still a little unfortunate that we're seeing these be moved to later phases. It was one of the cruxes, I think, in our original negotiation with the developer, was that these units were going to come early and provide some support for the housing society. I think to me, it gives me some I think there's been some learnings in this process of where our processes are perhaps getting in the way of some of what we have identified as priority projects for delivering to community on affordable housing, on childcare, on market rental. But I do think that given where we are today, that this is an acceptable compromise to move this project forward and ensure that those market rental buildings and the affordable units that are in the current phase get across the finish line. And then that there are still 2 additional affordable units in the 3rd and 4th phases. So with that, in our previous conversation, that it will still come with some cash for the multi-use path along Finch Drive. And it just means that we need to do our due diligence in ensuring that Fortis also steps up to delivering that multi-use path for this portion of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Councillor Pettingill, Greenlaw opposed, motion carries. Thank you very much. So Council, just take a moment to say that we're back on track and on time. So good pacing, everybody. We are now on to item 6.1, which is the EAO Floatel 2 feedback opportunity. We adopted an amended agenda today, and it was bullet point 2 here. Direct staff to provide technical comments. The EA is part of the technical advisory committee, with council's comments incorporated from today's meeting. And an original version of this agenda had the wrong date on the on that. That was I think it was the 29th. We're living in the future. So versus being here today. So council, we do have given the as it says in my memo in the agenda package, given the short turnaround, we didn't have a staff report for this. We tried to include some documents to get us to support the discussion. And we do have staff joining to help support us in the conversation. So, and just to remind, I'm sure everyone at the table knows this, but to anyone watching, we have opportunity to provide feedback. It hasn't directly been, and we also have provided much feedback in the past that some have incorporated, some not, that has gotten us to this point. So it's not mandatory that we provide feedback at this time, but I thought it was important that we, and at council's direction, we have the conversation around what feedback, if any, we should provide to the EA on this particular matter. So we don't have a staff, and because we don't have the staff report for those reasons mentioned previously, we don't have a presentation, but we do have staff available to support us in this conversation. So who would like to get us started? Councilor Penigal?
Well, just a question on the second part of the resolution, because in prior times when we provide EAO feedback, council has discussed the staff comments and had a review of them as well. We don't have that here. And so I just sort of want to make sure that staff comments would be sort of aligned with our OCP policy and including climate objectives and so on, our housing policy and work, not just in the OCP and so on, but these are the policy pieces that would be informing any staff commentary and thinking about the sort of types of comments we have seen in the staff comments to the extension, to the first Floatel, and those, like, that would be in the ballpark.
Perhaps I will just point out that in that second bullet point, with council's comments incorporated, so there's that layer to make sure that we have what council has, what they would like to say front and center. But perhaps I'll go to staff just for some comment around. We know that there's other working groups and there's very technical pieces happening. Can you speak to how that goes and how you expect it to go in this case?
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Devin Guest. I'm the manager of major projects industrial here for the District of Squamish. In response to Councillor Pettingill's question, staff comments will take council's direction and incorporate into their comments directly into the EAO process, along with, as advised by the EAO, individual technical level comments based on staff's area of expertise and guidance within the jurisdictions of our policies and bylaws.
Are you okay for now, Councillor Penigal? Okay. Other questions? So that sort of delineates that there will be technical pieces that staff will flush out and comment on, as well as providing whatever feedback we have, reinforcing whatever feedback we provide through this process that we're undertaking right now. So just to maybe add some framework here is, I think that if we can get to some bullet points and we can debate each bullet point to make sure that we are and working our way through the list. I don't want to rely on relying on comments or any, incorporating the feedback we heard today or any motions like that wouldn't serve us in this purpose. I think we need to be very explicit there, and that's why I've laid it out the way that we have. So we have a limited time with this, although we have another, I think we have an hour for this, which feels like enough, but conversations on this topic tend to go long, which we don't have opportunity to really do. So if anyone has specific feedback they'd like to provide, we don't need to wordsmith the whole letter. I can incorporate the bullet points, but I think that's how I'd like to structure this. And I think that's a path that can get us through this conversation and hopefully put together a package that that's supported by the majority of council. That's where we're trying to get to. So in support of that, we can we can put forward bullet points to be included, or if folks have another approach they'd like to see us use for this, that's totally fine. But this is our time to take that on. Councillor Pettigill.
Yeah, I can start. I just would like to frame, I did a lot of looking back at the council discussion and responses to the EAO on the 2020 certificate extension, because Woodfibre ran out of time on their certificate and asked for an extension. That put a lot of parameters, and basically they had to justify why their project had fundamentally started and that they could complete with the project as proposed. And there was a lot of council questions and feedback of the time of like, where's your actual plans that shows you with the workforce you've talked about, with these things, the plans you have, that you can actually complete this? And we want to understand what's the post-worker bust impacts and a bunch of things that, you know, the only thing that Woodfibre had mentioned in their EAO extension discussion was that, hey, we might need a flotel. We got the housing piece wrong. And one of the council feedback was all the documentation and so on from 2013 and policy the district had sent Woodfibre about our housing situation. So it wasn't just community comments. The district had that feedback, which was sent in the initial application and so on. So I think there's a lot of precedent of this council speaking to wanting Woodfibre to be held accountable to their workforce, the construction intensity and so on in the extension. And so even back then we were providing such feedback. And so that will come in some of the comments I'm going to suggest. I'd also say, you know, I do sometimes complain about the EAO not listening to us. And there are things where the EAO has not enshrined things in comments, which is discouraging. But there's actually quite a number of things where we see our feedback as a district reflected in conditions. And so that actually made me think, well, you know what, we're not going to get everything, but it is really worthwhile to raise all of our concerns, and they will accept some and not others. But I think it is, we have seen the value of providing that feedback. So I think it's really important. I will start, maybe I'll start just with an overall piece and then let others have a moment. For me, when I really started to dig into this, the analysis and so on focuses on a second flotel. And what that really hides or ignores is the fact that this is a doubling of construction intensity compared to what in the original assessment, the extension, the first flotel, we've heard over and over from the proponent, this is all the workforce we need. This is it. This is the intensity. This is the project. And so everything was premised on a particular project scope, 2.1 megatons per year, a particular workforce of about 650 people. And what is proposed here is now a doubling of that construction intensity. And then we're hearing from some federal folks that the proponent's looking to massively actually expand the plant. We know it has been positioned as a doubling of the pipeline for just storage, but it gives them the capacity to go much bigger. And so I will be speaking to, I think if they want to do those things, they can apply and we can have a discussion and amendment. But none of that, none of the information of what is a doubling of construction intensity look like, because Woodfibre is advertising for local workforce. And that's one of the things we've said is we have a shortage of workers. So we want plans about how you're not going to impact our local businesses when hiring. Procurement, we'd like to see local procurement, but impacting our workforce, that needs some planning. And so what a much more intense construction thing looks like is important. And another piece, they mentioned, contrary to other things they said in this amendment, about a 25-year project lifespan. And if that's the context we're considering and evaluating this in, fine, but I want it to be very clear. If it's something else, we should be clear about that. So I'm going to propose some conditions that fix it at sort of what we've assessed and contemplated this under. And if they actually want something different, fine, but then let's have that discussion with that clear context. And so I will leave it there for now and maybe come back to the more specific comments I have.
Okay, so I'm trying to figure out how to get us through this. We do have the technology to put the motion up on the screen. I think we can kind of do a straw poll on the individual items, maybe is how we do it. So we're not committing to, and then we'll vote on the overall. Is that, I'm just looking to I'm getting nods from our corporate officers. So, so if we start with 2 bullet points, would be, you know, not just considering the extra accommodation, which is really what the amendment's for, but really considering what that means in that overall, as you, I think you said, a look at what a more intensive construction activity looks like and the impact of that, to make sure the EA review is broad enough in scope. Does that summarize that point?
Yeah, I think more specifically, what this is premised on is a 2.1 megaton per year export volume, a construction workforce of, I'll come back to 650 workers, and a 25-year project lifespan. Those are things that have previously or currently been identified. The one change is that they are proposing a much larger workforce than 650, but there's been no analysis other than on the Floatel piece itself. And I think if they want to go broader than 650 workers, what is the analysis to support and to figure out what mitigations are needed, because it has procurement impacts. It has,
okay. So I'm gonna put this back to you. You went into rationale as well as the point. So I'm gonna try to detangle the two. But if you can turn that into something that we can do a straw poll on, I'm gonna go around the room and we'll come back to that.
Sure. So what
do you have a second? I have another hand. So do you want to take a second to?
Well, I have it written out, and it's actually in the comments I sent to council. So there's a specific bullet.
Can you pull that out? Can you send it to our corporate officer? And we'll get it up on the screen, and then we'll go from there. Okay, Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks. To me, a significant difference between Floatel 1 and Floatel 2 is the use of a diesel-fired generator to supply the initial power to the Floatel. In the EAO application, they say they intend to connect Floatel 2 to shore power. BC Hydro advises the amount of available power will be sufficient. This is good. Engineering design and procurement have long lead times, leading to up to 6 months to connect to shore power. In the interim, onboard diesel generators will be used. So my concern here is that I understand the potential need to use an onboard diesel generator for a short period of time. That's, to me, not altogether unreasonable. But I have a concern that without some explicit deadline or consequence for moving to shore power, it may just stay on diesel for a prolonged period of time. So it's not clear to me, and it's not clear to me where the jurisdiction on this lies. From a housing perspective, we expect all new residential builds to have a no gas covenant on them. Yeah, so that's clearly a performance piece. Like it's a piece of environmental protection that we put in place in every one of our residential developments. It's not clear to me whether this piece, the diesel power generator on a Floatel, is within our jurisdiction, as it is with a no gas covenant, or is it in the EAO's jurisdiction? Does staff have any reflection on that?
Okay.
And
I have a suggestion on wording. So we'll go to staff
Great.
on the jurisdictional piece.
Through the mayor. At this time, that is a very specific question. The TUP in front of council at this time contemplates land use. I will have to confer with my planning colleagues to see if the diesel concerns addressed by Councillor Hamilton is in or out of our jurisdiction. The EAO will receive comments such as what Councillor Hamilton has proposed.
So I think, so just in thinking about this particular point, I think that, providing comments doesn't necessarily need to be asking for things that aren't there yet. It can be reinforcing the importance. So the letter could reinforce the importance of our interest or support for ship-to-shore power, should they approve, and perhaps request a timeline that should occur so it doesn't happen in perpetuity. Is that?
Absolutely. And the application suggests a 6-month timeline. The proponent suggested it would be conservatively 6 months. So my suggestion would be that there is some explicit constraint on the any certificate that they had. They're limited to 6 months use of a diesel power generator.
Yeah, I think okay, I think we have a starting of a bullet point we can just start to do our straw poll on. So, but I'll go to Councillor Stoner on, is it on this point?
I'd like to suggest that bullet point for that straw poll be a little bit more ambitious and actually just state that we wouldn't support the use of a diesel generator at all, given the commitment that the proponent made in 2020 to approve Floatel number 1 required them to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions in line with the commitment that was made and approved by the EAO. And so I think that that is a continuous bar that we should hold the proponent to and the EAO to from their 2020 commitments.
Okay. Sorry, in these situations, sometimes I have a hard time putting together the wording. So that's okay. I appreciate that. If you could get that to our corporate officer, and we'll put it up, and then those come in, we'll try to do some mini votes as we go. I appreciate that. Councillor Penningill.
Yeah, just for that, a couple things. One, in its 2019 feedback to the first Floatel Council, that was one of the pieces, is that any Floatel needed to be powered by electricity and not diesel. So the proponent has known since 2019 that this was an important consideration for the district. I'd also say our TUP allows us and requires us to sort of enact things within our jurisdiction. The EAO process has no such constraint. So we may choose to only speak to things that we feel are in our jurisdiction, but it is our opportunity to speak on behalf of our citizens on any topic, climate change, whatever it be. So we aren't constrained by the normal things we are in a TUP discussion.
Yeah, thank you. And I think we have seen some examples of in the amendment for the first Floatel, there were some things in there that I think fall fully into our jurisdiction. And that's what makes it sort of hard to interact with these things sometimes. There's a bit of a Venn diagram where there are things that are clearly ours and things that are clearly the province, but they're chose, I think, in response to feedback such as that, to include some things that would generally be in our jurisdiction. Go ahead.
To confirm with your comments, Mayor, that is indeed the intent of council providing public comment at this time.
Yeah, thank you. I think reinforcing, so I can tell you're typing over there, Councillor Stoner. On this item, I think that reinforcing that this was a comment provided by council in 2019 and a condition of the previous piece sort of builds the case for that. And that makes a lot of sense. So thank you, Councillor Penningill, for that additional piece. Any other comments as we work towards this? We'll start to getting some straw polls here shortly. Go ahead, Councillor Greenlaw.
Yeah, well, I have a few comments. I can expand upon them, or I'll keep them succinct for now. I still think this is an opportunity where we should point out that there should be a cumulative impact assessment for this project, including the pipeline. That is the industry standard for several other industries. And I can't overemphasize how important that piece is, and that it's missing. It's really difficult to assess the impacts of doubling the workers for a construction project when you don't have that cumulative impact piece. But I would also say from my perception of reading all this, it seems like there's an assumption that there will be minimal to no impact in doubling the workforce, but clearly there will be. And unless I'm incorrect, Councillor Pettengill can correct me, where I historically sat on the Ocean Watch Committee, and Councillor Pettengill currently does. But there have been, to my, in reading these, it seems like there are not very many noise concerns, but there are several residents of Bowen Island, Britannia Beach. All of these communities are complaining about the noise being generated by the vessel that is chartering workers across to the site. So there are definitely noise concerns, and presumably that impact will be doubled once the workforce is doubled. And again, perhaps I missed this. I didn't see any plans for evacuations for emergencies and how those have changed. Like the pieces like that, if there is something that happens, what's being changed to make sure that these workers are safe. But also doubling the waste produced and wastewater produced, like the impacts will not be nothing. So I do feel like there has been an underrepresentation of the impacts of doubling this population. I've also been speaking to several people in the mineral resource sector, as well as the cruise ship industry, and I have legitimate concerns about the mental health impact of having employees living on a boat on rotation, granted, but for years. I've worked in a lot of isolated, rugged camps in many different environments, and I've seen people, we call it getting bushed, and it's not good. Anyways, I'm concerned about that piece and relying on the proponent to get this information, this feedback from the employees. Like we can't rely on them to provide or even procure unbiased information of this type. So my request there would be that the EAO actually attempts to contact some of the employees individually to make sure that they are healthy and happy. I'm not sure how that would be executed, but we can't rely on a proponent for that kind of information. I think it's irresponsible to even consider this amendment without public access to a thorough and complete Henriette Dam risk assessment. We have a memo from Northwest Hydraulic Consultants that we received, I think, yesterday, which I don't think is public either. Or yes, it is public, but either way, it doesn't clarify modeling type employed, and it doesn't include a fulsome hazard assessment. So a public fulsome hazard assessment of the Henriette Dam risk assessment, I think, is something that should happen. Oh, and I'm not sure if this is an EAO feedback piece or a feedback for wood fiber, but the deposit is inadequate. The 1% of the asset value, sorry, it's been doubled now, so it's 2% of the asset value is not enough. What's that? Yeah, that's for the TUP, yeah.
So I think the technical details to the TUP best live exclusively with the TUP unless we're asking the province to take some specific action to hedge this.
For like in mineral resources, the project has the province has mechanisms to calculate how much of a deposit you should put down. So I'm not sure if that applies to this or if that's something for the District of Squamish to consider. But if the EAO has any mechanisms of determining how much deposit is made, then I think that they should employ that. That's why I said I'm not sure if it's
okay. I see
for
where
them.
you're going there.
Oh, also, yeah, I think I'll, yeah, I think I'll leave it at that for now. I have more, but we'll see how the conversation unfolds.
Okay. I think that, all right, do we have some content? We got a couple? Let's do that. Let's get,
Okay,
yeah,
I have two.
yeah, if you can bring it up, we'll get going. And then, Councillor Greenland, did you have those in form you can get to our corporate officer, or should we develop those?
I can do some bullet points.
Yeah, that would be great, just to support this. Okay, so okay, so I think wrap my head around this. I think a certificate hotels. Should limit the project scope, sir. Okay, so we're going to go for on this first one. Councillor Pettigill, do you want to read or run us through this one? And I see bullet point 3 is cumulative impact. I think that was adjacent to that's a separate piece.
Yeah, so I just proposed initially the first one. For me, I think of the comments I have, this is the most important. I had a much longer set of comments, but this sort of encapsulates, I think, the fact that what seems to be implied here is a much larger project that has no assessment and so on. And so this, the EAO may not accept this, but I think we should ask for this on behalf of our public. And what I think it does is in my mind says to the proponent, look, if you want something more, then be upfront and honest about it and provide the information, the assessment, and the mitigations, because this is looking back to our previous feedback or what the proponent has engaged on, put in all their plans. It is these things. And I will, as I said, I would concede that the Floatel number 2 application does talk about more than 650 numbers, but there's no analysis other than around a boat itself, like the housing form, in terms of the impact of a double construction. There's no analysis, no mitigations, none of that. So I'm saying, like, if that's what we're talking about, we should have an assessment and a discussion about that. So that's why this is here. And I think then this avoids a lot of discussion of, oh, well, we need a plan for the doubling of workforce and a plan for this and assessment of this and that. This sort of just says, this is what we've been told and given data on. So let's keep it at that. And if we want something more, then let's have those discussions.
Okay, and the can you refresh my memory? The max workforce at 650 is something that's in the original certificate?
In their applications. I don't think the certificates put a workforce number, but all of the engagement and the analysis of impacts, the mitigations that would be performed and were necessary and so on was all premised on a 650 number that Wood Fiber said over and over again. So never said, or maybe it'll be bigger. It was always, and the district asked about this with our extension in 2020. So again, these questions about the size of the workforce, what do you need to make this happen if you get an extension? These aren't actually even new comments. This is reflective of prior feedback as well from the district.
So just my comments on this, I understand where you're going and I'm generally supportive of this. The export volume is something that is an EA process and would need to be varied in the EA process if that's what they so desired to vary it. But I'm okay reinforcing that here. The workforce, I remember seeing projections that had all sorts of numbers to overall workforce. I think, and I don't know that this 650 number, I don't feel comfortable that the accuracy of this number for this purpose. So I'm having a hard time with that. But the project lifespan, I think, is important to point to clarify as well. So that part I'm having a challenge with, and I'm looking for a path through that. Go ahead.
Well, just to comment, I think when I looked back, the only charts where it showed a much higher workforce was when they were showing the cumulative with Fortis. The wood fiber piece has always been in the 650 piece. And so that's what, and again, that's what all the engagement has been. And when you read all their application documents, it's that number. And so all the feedback, everything everyone's talked about has been around that number. And we're talking about a doubling. Maybe we're okay with that, but there hasn't been any analysis of that, even what's proposed here.
I think that something around like original projections or approved workforce or something would be more comfortable than pulling a number, because I do agree that it's likely higher than anything that was stated anywhere. But by stating a number here, I think we're at risk of lowering the impact of the point. So max construction work, change to max construction workforce or something would that be okay? On that first bullet point, I've proposed that we change it to like an increase in max construction workforce or some wording like that I'd like it to be still accurate because it's an increase. I don't want to get tripped up with that number, but go ahead, Councillor Storm.
Well, I think I understand where Councillor Pettingill is going with this. I think I would be more comfortable with just taking that bullet out. amendment application is to double the workforce. And so while I appreciate that, I think what you're trying to get at is you don't feel like the EAO amendment application fairly addresses the impact of doubling the workforce. That is different than like this line, which is the max construction workforce of 650. Like that's not what's now being proposed. And so if your concern is that the amendment as presented doesn't fairly, from your perspective, address the impacts of a doubling of the workforce, then that is one thing. But as presented here, I just think
So
kind of
perhaps it's
yelling
that,
into the wind.
well, perhaps it's that additional bullet point. Was it number 3? Was it number 3? Can we scroll down a little bit? Like this cumulative impact. I guess that's broadly the overall project, but I do think that there's something separate around, okay, we're assessing the EA and we're all being asked to assess this boat, but there's more to it. And I think that does deserve its own point that could be stronger than including it there. Is that sort of what you're saying there, Councillor Stoner? Could remove the increase in the construction workforce language and just make it its own bullet that's about, hey, assess this increase in workforce and the impact of that, while we're not just the boat.
I mean, if that's the concern that my council colleagues have, I would ask them to articulate what in the cumulative assessment is not being addressed. So the assessment as presented suggests that there's one extra vessel to move people from the current location in Metro Van to the vessel if Floatel 2 goes in. And so there is a cumulative, like there's a additional, whether you think it's cumulative across both projects, there is an assessment of the additional impact, which is how typically EAs are done. And so I would just challenge my council colleagues to articulate more what portion of the cumulative impact assessment they don't think is adequate.
Okay, I'm trying to get us to this first bullet point. I know we're into the third one, but comment on this?
Yeah, so I did sort of try in the preamble to those 3 bullets, try to say consistent with what's in, that were fundamental premises of applications, engagements, and assessments, et cetera. So it sets that framing. If we want to pull out that second one and do it more explicitly, we can. I was trying to keep this simpler, which is here. And what they don't do, like they talk about, yes, there will be some additional ferry traffic and so on, but it doesn't get into prior council feedback had been, we have a very tight labor force. We didn't want this project to cause employment challenges for our existing businesses. And so while procurement was supported as a follow of this project, we were concerned about employment impacts. We were also concerned, and this was in our extension feedback, about a bust. So if there's a huge reliance on local employment, when all the construction goes away, what happens? We want some analysis on some of that. And Wood Fiber has started, I would call it aggressively advertising local employment in the Squamish Chief, which is tied to not a flotel, but the fact that they're wanting to massively increase construction intensity. So they're looking for more local workers. So what are the impacts to our local workforce? What is this bust impact? All of these things. I was trying to keep things distinct, but this is the sort of analysis that's missing if we want to double the workforce. That's not flotel related. Flotel's neither here nor there. It's all these other things that there's been no eyes on.
To get us through this, I think that I think we can on point 1, an increase in max construction workforce would be the end of that sentence to me. So of 650 can go away, if that's okay. I'm getting a nod. So I think that by putting this here, like, hey, if you want to increase the workforce, let's explicitly talk about increasing the workforce. I think that's what that says, and we can even reinforce that point elsewhere if needed. So giving time with the motion there. Does this make it better or worse, Councillor Stoner?
I'm generally challenged by this, but maybe it's just me.
Yep, that's Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, just some my perspective on this bullet. I think that the 2.1 megaton per year export volume, I don't think this is an effective mechanism for us to constrain the export volume of this facility. If that was a desire, this is not a mechanism to achieve that. I don't see how the consideration of a flotel would be tied to that. And the project lifespan, I don't see that being connected either, because 25 years from now, I can't imagine any promise being made of a flotel holding up that they have to shut down the project in 25 years. I think I see where my council colleague is trying to achieve here, but those two bullets, the total export volume and the project lifespan, I think are well outside the scope of consideration of a second workforce accommodation. The point on the size of the construction workforce, that is absolutely on point with a second flotel. That is a direct consequence of the second flotel. Whether or not or how carefully government should be controlling the size of a company's workforce is something that I'm perhaps not in alignment on with my council colleague.
So I'm going to go around. I'll give you a chance to rebut this, but we need to go around the table on this first point. We've heard some general challenges with this, but I'll go to Councillor Greenlaw on this, the wording of this exact point one.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what my colleagues on this side of the horseshoe are getting at, and I can see the disconnect there. But I think what Councillor Pettengill is trying to emphasize is that these are exactly the kind of cumulative impacts that are not being considered currently in this proposition. I guess there is a discomfort of what doubling the workforce actually means in the long term. Like, is this an attempt to increase the capacity of this facility? I don't like, this is the MO of the resource extractive industry. You go in there with a small request and then you wedge it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And these are exactly the decision points where that piece of information becomes pertinent, and perhaps there is a lack of transparency of what this request actually entails or implies.
Anyone else on these? I'll go back to you, Councillor Pettengill, after. I just want to see on including something in bullet or this first item. We've heard some mixed reviews of this, support for it, and some opposition to including it as written. So any other comments on this, Councillor Finch?
Yeah, I just generally don't support anything in this. The 2.1 megatons per year for an export volume is a federally regulated. I don't understand why we need to reiterate something that's already basically written in stone, and I don't believe that what's happening here is an attempt to try and increase that number from 2.1 megatons a year. It doesn't make any sense to me that a project of this magnitude and of would try and fudge this number up in the way that's being talked about. And the 25-year project lifespan is distinctly different from the 40-year permit that has been issued federally. So I just don't understand that third bullet point at all. The company has been fairly open with that 24-year or 25-year project lifespan phrase, which is distinctly different from the 40-year permit that they have. And the only thing in here that I can wrap my brain around is that middle point that talks about an increase in the workforce. There's something to that, but everything around it prevents me from supporting bullet number one.
I'm going to go to Councillor Anderson. I have a comment. I'll come back to you, Councillor Pettengill.
I will really be echoing the comments of Councillor Hamilton and Councillor French. That is, I think we need to stay focused and stick to what is in our jurisdiction. To me, in the discussion under number 0.1, I don't really appreciate the heading sentence there. I think I suggest we just simply ask for an analysis of potential impact on the Squamish labor market. That's it. That's the only thing for me that I can approve of in all of that number 1 and the 3 points.
So I think with this one, the way that I sort of edited down bullet point 2, I think would need to be something similar to happen in the other bullet points for me to support this. It says we need to have explicit, should explicit limit the scopes, fundamental premises, and so on. And this is about having those explicit conversations. So if we want to talk about, hey, if there's a change to export volume, we want to have that conversation. If there's a change to maximum construction workforce, we need to explicitly have that conversation. As far as the project lifespan, the business realities are going to drive that in future. And I don't know that as we heard, there's already a permit, there's a 40-year permit. So I don't know how relevant that particular piece is to comment on, but wanting to have those explicit discussions, not a proxy discussion for those, which I think is what we're having with the Floatel and the workforce, although that can maybe be flushed out in an individual. So I'm going to go to Councillor Pettingill for rebuttal to any of those comments, but I also want to say that we're 45 minutes into our hour on this, and we're on bullet point 1. So we need to move through this in some way, but Councillors.
I do think this is the most important bullet because I think it captures a lot of things. The reason the 25 years in there is because this is a brand new number that Wood Fibre introduced in this application. The EAO, in what their guidance for what you put in an EAO response, is to point out errors or inconsistencies and so on. And so for me, this jumped out at me, and I want to understand there's no explanation of why this new number is there, where it comes from. And so that's why that is there. There may be a different way to express that. I was trying to keep it succinct. And the point of this resolution was not to limit the project to 2.1. It is the fact that all of the engagement discussion has been around this. And then there's a request to double the construction workforce, which could be, from what we're hearing, to a doubling of the output or whatever. If that's what it is, like, let's have, as the mayor said, an explicit discussion about this. So if striking the specific 2.1 number out of there is helpful, I'm okay with that, but I just sort of want to keep the framing of this as they need to double the workforce. Let's have a discussion with all the understanding. Council in 2020 specifically said to the EAO, if you're going to give this extension, help us understand and ask the proponent to provide plans to ensure that they can do it with what they've talked about. And so that was explicit feedback. And so if you need more workforce, if you need more other things to actually complete this in the next 5 years, speak to us about this, give us those plans so we can analyze that. And Wood Fibre hasn't done that here. And so again, this is just building on our 2020 feedback.
Okay, Councillor Stoner.
So I did send some proposed different bullet points to Melissa, that we would break this out into 3 different bullet points. So one would be that we request confirmation that the project is indeed capped and limited at 2.1 metric tons export volume, even with this proposed amendment. The second would be clarification that if the project lifespan is 25 years or 40 years, and explicitly say that there are contrary references to the project lifespan in the original proposal versus the Floatel number 2 amendment. And if the project is indeed expected to be, that should say 40-year lifespan, then we would request that the air quality impact analysis provided on page 58 of the amendment application be redone for a 40-year lifespan project. And that the third bullet point would be conduct a fulsome analysis on the local economic and labor impacts, positive or negative, of the doubling of the workforce for the WLNG project.
Okay, so I think so support on this. There's maybe just a show of hands as far as the preferred approach here. I'm going to say who would like to proceed with option, we'll say called option 1 that was up there, and then option 2 will be what Councillor Stoner's definition to attempt to capture essentially similar feedback. So is there a preference for option 1? Okay, we are on to option 2. On those individual bullet points in option 2, just generally as a suite of we'll try to group them all together to move us through. Are we supportive of providing that feedback and request for clarity? Is there anyone that is not comfortable with those comments or wants to hear them again before we have the straw poll? Again, okay. Well, let's just say we have a general general support for that. We'll go through the exact language when we actually vote on the overall. If everyone's okay with that, there was a couple calls for clarity, but there seemed to be support. So go ahead.
I have others that I'll just
Yep, go ahead.
also emailed to Melissa, but I'll put them on the floor for consideration as she's pulling the document together. Oh,
It's going to take me quite some time to get these all consolidated. So I would suggest that if you are emailing me comments to be included, also include council as to get everybody on the same page. Yeah, thank you.
that I can do. So I think to Councillor Pettingill's point, continuing to beat the drum that we have tried to relay back to the EAO ever since the start of this project, that the engagement and feedback windows continue to be insufficient in this process. I'd like to clarify in our feedback to the EAO that Floatel number 1 is currently operating without a TUP or local permits due to the applicant withdrawing its application for a TUP, because that doesn't seem to be entirely clear in the application as presented. As previously spoken about, that council does not support the use of diesel generators, and that there a request to the EAO that they investigate and enforce the use of hotels and local accommodations by the proponent, because this continues to be an issue that's raised in community.
Hey, on that last point, I was wondering about, I was thinking about including some language around the exceptions. In the permit, it has the ability to, it says the workforce must live there except under circumstances. I just wondered about the value of having some clarity there as part of that. Like, to me, those exceptions would be what we would be seeing in impacting local accommodation. Could those be combined, do you think, Councillor Stone? Or do you feel this is a different matter?
I think we could expand it. I think my intention is just to put the onus back on the EAO to actually do their job.
Is that the feedback? No. Okay. Councillor Pettingill?
Yeah, just on that point, I had a comment, which I guess I don't need to make now, that the BC EAO should investigate Woodfibre LNG's use of Squamish Hotel's accommodations in the Sirocco building, as these uses appear to be contrary to existing certificate conditions and in the application. And it's actually really incorrect grammar. So I can't tell what Woodfibre is saying, but it sounds like they are explicitly calling out in their application that they're using hotels in a manner contrary to the certificate. I can't wrap my head around what exactly they're saying, and it seems so. I think it is appropriate to push it over to the EAO to investigate more deeply, because it seems like Woodfibre is actually saying, hey, we're disobeying the certificate.
Does that, I mean, I feel that these were similar points that okay, Councillor Stoner?
I was just going to say, I fully appreciate that. My intention on these bullet points is to try and keep them high level enough to provide direction to the mayor, and not get into the nuances of crafting a letter at this table.
Thank you. I'm about to send one through. I'm going to talk about a piece that I feel is important, is relating to the gender and cultural safety plan. So, and my thoughts here are that the gender and cultural safety plan be further refined to include an interface to the public, as its current form is exclusively for internal purposes and does not address public safety concerns. Everyone familiar with that? The current gender cultural safety plan is fully internal to the operations of the workforce, and we know that elements of the workforce, the concerns that we heard that led to that, to me requiring a gender cultural safety plan were from, and the EA heard, were from the public about being concerned about impacts public safety into the community. So I think that the workforce is could be well served by the current plan, but further work is needed to really address this, particularly as we know there are a mechanism for exemption for needing to reside on the flotel, and there are and the Fortis plan is far more public facing and really actually is public facing and addresses that public safety concern more meaningfully. So trying to get some alignment between the two, but ideally, I think the concerns came from a concern for public safety, and it's not being addressed in that plan at this point, from my perspective. So I'm going to go on this point just to see if we can add to the list of things approved. Does everyone, any issues with that? So that the gender and culture safety plan be further refined to include an interface to the public, as its current form is exclusively for internal purposes and does not address public safety.
My one comment there, in general, I'm supportive, but I think we have seen particular issues where we specifically as the public's representative, and maybe this is what you're trying to get at, had only had observer status, so we couldn't actually be a full participant. And when we had challenges, the response was grossly inadequate and still has not been addressed. And so
I think we have lots to say about the mechanisms used to achieve this, but for me, in the spirit of staying at the highest level possible, how we get there, we need an adequate plan that addresses public safety for this gender cultural safety category of issues. So I'm trying to leave it at that level at this point. So any opposition to including this piece of feedback? Okay, so we got another piece in there. I'm sending that to sorry. Yes, please.
Thank you, through the chair. The application references the joint WLNG Fortis BC Cumulative Impacts Committee and says that it's been meeting quarterly with reference to Appendix B, but it doesn't actually show up in Appendix B. So I was just curious if staff can speak to whether that meeting is actually happening and if it's feeling productive from our perspective.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Stoner. I will confirm that the Joint Cumulative Impacts Committee is meeting. And at this point, I'll leave the comment as is.
Oh, go ahead.
If there are further specific questions about the committee, staff would be happy to answer it.
Thank you, through the chair. I think my question is, it's encouraging to hear that it is meeting. Is it providing us insight into the cumulative impacts, especially in terms of housing, that we were expecting it was going to be able to provide us, as it was something that we had requested through the last amendment that this for the Floatel, and this became a condition of that project. And so I'm just curious if it's feeling like it's achieving the goal as we had requested it previously.
Thank you for the opportunity to follow up. We are getting metrics and feedback as defined by the proponent. From a staff perspective, I do believe that there is still a slight gap in the interpretation and the scoping of the metrics.
Okay, Council, I just want to check with staff and see what we've accumulated. I've seen the emails that have been feeding into that process. I know we're going to go past the 5 minutes. We have 5 minutes left allotted to this. I'll try to give it some more time, but we do have some pretty solid deadlines today. So I'll go to Ms. Blondin.
Okay, I can share the screen. I've included the comments that we've received, except for yours, Councillor Hamilton, because they're mixed in with Councillor Stoner's. They are exactly as they were presented in the email, so staff have not played with them at all, except for yours, Councillor Pettengill, based off of earlier conversation. It still remains the same.
Okay, and just as we set out to do this, we are as has been stated, we're not trying to craft the letter itself, is to leave some room to like, what point are we trying to make? And we'll try to make that point when I craft the letter. So my intent is not to forward on just the bullet points, but to sort of flush them out a little bit. So we're looking for general topics and concerns. I don't think there was interest in that first bullet point. I think the pieces below it sort of address that, is where we landed. Is that anyone? Okay, I'm seeing some nodding, so we can strike that whole first piece. Councillor Anderson?
I'd like to, and I'm not sure whether staff may be able to, I'm not fresh on the existence of an adequate evacuation plan for these flotels in case of an emergency. That is something I'd like to emphasize. I'd like to also comment on this matter of diesel generators. I was a director for a number of years of the society that oversees the Airshed's air quality management plan, and we reviewed diesel generators used for the compressors. We found it's not clear cut. For example, for the environmental footprint of putting in electricity for the compressors was more than the diesel generators. It's not so clear cut. We have at Brennan Park issues from BC Hydro not able to cope with the logistics at this time of hooking up for electricity. I just think it's a practical matter, and I don't think that it's one that we need to be so it's not clear cut. It's a legitimate logistical issue that BC Hydro has spelled out for them and it's spelled out for us. But again, I'd come back to the evacuation plan, an adequate evacuation plan, emergency evacuation plan for these two, the second proposed vessel, but Flotel 1 as well. That's it for me.
So on the question on what does emergency planning look like here? Like, is this a subsequent step? Is it something that we should be, I mean, we can raise it as a concern here, but is it meant to be addressed in this process, or is it a subsequent process? Could staff provide some insight into how that's been handled thus far?
Through the mayor, the Environmental Assessment Office, as part of the amendment application, will review the emergency management plans of the proponent.
Okay, so just okay. So we don't need to include you're not proposing we include a specific bullet point on that, Councillor Anderson?
I assume we were.
Okay, so let's go through the list here and then we'll see what's missing just to come back to that, because I think I've heard some reference to that earlier. So we'll just go through this. So go ahead.
Through the chair to staff, typically emergency management plans are not made public, but they are done in collaboration with the district. And so can I just confirm whether we have seen any update to our current emergency management plans with this proponent given the proposed extension, or is that something that we expect to be forthcoming?
Thank you for the question through the chair. We expect that to be forthcoming. It is a iterative and ongoing conversation with WLNG, both from a construction phase and long-term planning.
Okay. Okay, so we don't need to. Okay, so we're not including a specific bullet point there. I'm going to go down to this this next section from Councillor Stoner. Yep.
If we could skip over Councillor Stoner's quickly, because I do need to update it.
I see some
You can pull it
duplication there and
down
stuff. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so
and update
you
it.
take us on that journey. You want to scroll us down to?
And sorry, following up, Councillor Anderson's emergency response plan.
We
is
don't.
that
We
striking?
feel that was adequately addressed, I think, with the answer. But I'll go to staff.
I appreciate that my answer adequately addressed it. I would also like to point out that it is a condition as part of the TUP before council.
Okay. Thank you. Now on to this suite of feedback. So I think reiterating. So maybe we should do them one by one. I'm going to look for opposition here. So the first one, cumulative impact assessment for the project, including the pipeline. I think that is there anyone opposed to including these like cumulative piece? I know we're getting some cooperation now. This has been sort of a reoccurring ask around coordination, and I think there's a lot of things sort of in there. Is that any opposition to including this piece? I think it's restating a previous ask generally. Okay. I think the item 2 relates to, well, the conversation we just had around emergency planning and response. So given that conversation, I don't think we need to include that here. I'm open to others. Councillor Stoner?
Yeah, thanks. I think just reflecting on comments from staff in the discussion, I think it'd be helpful to reiterate it here in terms of feedback to the EAO, that it's something that we continue to expect the proponent to work with us to ensure that emergency management plans are updated accordingly if this is approved.
So, yeah, I'm fine reinforcing that point. My challenge here is that, is it improved transparency that we want, or we want improved planning or improved coordination of that planning? So as worded, I don't know that that's what we're asking here. Councillor Greenland, do you want to speak to that particular piece and we can kind of flush it out?
That the proponent be required to continue to work with the district on emergency response management plans.
Just that period, no doubling workforce or anything as a result of doubling the workforce. Okay, so are we okay with that language? I think that language that works better for me, because I don't know that we want to be involved in the planning and for that planning to be effective. Not necessarily the transparency is not the key piece, but transparency is a piece of it. So can you do that language again? I'll have corporate officer change the wording and then we'll move forward.
As you're trying to work on the document and I'm amending it, I think it's just that we request that the proponent be required to work with the district to update and improve emergency response plans resulting from the doubling of the workforce.
Okay, is everyone okay with this piece? Okay, moving forward, I think, so this one, EA direct engage with workers on site to determine mental health and safety employees on board. I think I kind of like this. I think consulting with the employees on how effective things are is makes sense. There was some of that in the application, but I think having the EA do that directly would be a good suggestion.
Yeah, and I wonder if it should be explicitly stated that relying on the proponent for this information introduces an inherent bias or something to that effect. Like you can't, I mean, we've been through this already. You can't expect a proponent to police themselves. That's the role of the EAO. You know what I mean?
Perhaps
I don't think people are going to be honest to their employers of how they're experiencing their.
So perhaps saying why to mental health safety of employees on board to ensure unfiltered feedback is received by the EA. That sound okay? To ensure unfiltered feedback is received. Well, direct
representative
feedback.
Or
yeah, it's direct feedback, not. I was trying to get unfiltered to show that it could be filtered, manipulated by a proponent if you're as a middle agency there. Does this one feel okay for everybody? Okay, next, Henrietta Dam risk assessment. I think including something about Henrietta Dam makes sense to me. I don't necessarily, whether it's reasonable for it to be, I don't know what the issue is with it being public or not, but we want to make sure that risk is taken into consideration. That's to me more important than if it's publicly available or not for whatever reason. But it's not a deal breaker for me on this one. I'll go to you, Councillor Greenlaw, and then
Yeah, I'm not like attached to it being publicly available, but at least for the decision makers, I think it should be available, including the nation, the province, the feds, like all the regulatory bodies on the project should have that piece of information, because otherwise I think we're opening ourselves up to a lot of liability. I get that there can be indemnity clauses, but if there are fatalities, I doubt that an indemnity clause is going to hold up in court if we have not had, if we have had some sort of negligence in not collecting the data that we should have in the first place.
so how about that a Folsom Henrietta Lake Dam risk assessment occur?
Well, it has to be a bit stronger than that. It has to be available to the regulatory bodies and preferably publicly accessible as well. Because if it, because right now wood fiber is saying, oh, we did that, but we can't actually see behind the curtain and see what they actually looked at. And so we don't really know what information is being assessed. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, how about what
If
we
we
have?
say
How
it's-
about what we have here? Thank you, corporate officer, for the suggested wording. So, okay, are there any issues with the wording here, Councillor Penigal?
Yeah, I think asking for it publicly is important because I've gotten a lot of requests from the district all the way down to Lions Bay for this information. So there is a number of people in the public who are asking to scrutinize this. We're asking for the same level of things that we have made in our own processes with our integrated flood hazard management plan for the Garibaldi estates. Like, that's the level of plan. This isn't asking for proprietary information or trade secrets or anything. This is sort of standard risk assessments.
So how about regulatory bodies at minimum and preferably public? Does that get us there? Okay. I just say at minimum in front of after bodies, and then preferably. And then this is the deposit amount. And again, I think this one is, I feel like this one's maybe a bit more for us. I don't know where the deposit amount comes into an EA process. So I'm not in favor of including this one. I don't know, is anyone else, like, how does everyone feel about this item? Yes, no, yeah, go ahead.
That seems wholly in our jurisdiction, not in the EAOs, so I think we should remove it.
Yeah, and that was my original question. I don't know if this goes to the EAO or not, but like, again, with other regulatory bodies, with other industries, there is a provincial mandate for deposits. I'm not sure if it would apply solely to something that is a floatel.
Yeah.
But like, I'm not like, I just thought we should flag that provincially, because I know in other industries that lives with the province.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking like wellheads and abandoned mines and that kind of
Well, exploration camps have to have a given deposit, and that is just tents in the middle of nowhere. So it would be the same as this, but I don't know if that applies to this industry because they've got no regulations. But don't get me started.
So I think I saw some nodding heads. Is if we remove this, would anybody? I feel that we should remove this. I think it does. I appreciate that we're going there. I think this is a discussion for us, and we'll have it at a upcoming TUP discussion. So I'm okay to strike that. Is that okay for everyone? Yeah, I'll take the hesitant nods as progress. We'll try to get through here. This is the noise. Okay, so then I think some of these might duplicate with Councillor Sloan. Did you? I'll go number 6 actually. So this is complaints around the noise of the vessel traveling back and forth. So I'd be more comfortable with saying that the impact of those additional trips can be given appropriate consideration. The actual noise of a specific vessel might, I know that there's been some changes made. I know that Transport Canada regulates things on the water. I'm just thinking like, how do we capture this and the other things? If they fix that, maybe there's wake considerations or wildlife, sponge reefs, all those things as well. And I think this misses those things, but Councillor Benningill?
Yeah, sorry. And I just sent my remaining comments to everyone, but the first one ties into this, and I'd forgotten someone had mentioned this already, but from the Ocean Watch Committee and the boat that's being discussed, they did do muffler upgrades, but I'm still hearing from Lions Bay all the way to Squamish ongoing concerns about the noise, the wake, and the speed. But there are a couple other things where we're hearing, the proposal says, oh, there's no complaints, but I'm hearing from the community, oh, this or that's happening. We have no way of evaluating that. So I was suggesting that the EAO execute additional active mitigations and or monitoring of wood fiber LNG condition compliance, especially regarding, but limited to, community access, use of community housing and accommodations, Floatel lighting, which we hear from Britannia Beach, the worker ferry noise, speed and wake, and worker safety and living conditions. And so it's just asking the EAO in particular to look at those aspects, because that's what we hear.
Okay, so I think
Can I speak to what I was trying to capture here?
yeah, I'm sorry, I will give you that trying to give everyone the opportunities. The clock's ticking to something that's we have a very hard stop, including eating lunch before we go do something else that's going to be a big deal. So I want to make sure that we move through this. So I think that what we just heard addresses some pieces here. So I'll go back to Councillor Greenlaw on this point, and we'll try to chug back through. We still have to go to Councillor Stoner's once we.
Yeah, so basically what I was trying to say with this point is, again, I got the impression, going through the EAO pieces and that they're saying that there hasn't been any feedback around this, and we are definitely hearing this. There are a lot of people in a lot of different communities who are concerned about it. So I guess what I'm just trying to say is there are concerns around noise and lighting and pieces like that, and just making sure that the EAO is aware of that. And perhaps something in this could say, like, we can put you in touch with people who are having who are complaining about this.
So I think that if we were to include this and the wording that we had from Councillor Pettingill, I can wordsmith them together and to try to, it's unlikely to be perfect by everyone's standards, but if we're okay with that approach, we can move through this item. We know that there's been concerns around the vessels, and there could be other impacts even if they look after the noise piece in the short term. So I'd like it to be a bit broader. I'm happy leaving both in the motion, and then we can go back and push those together. I think that point 7 here in Councillor Stoner's motion, I think it speaks to the housing piece, I think, more appropriately. So I think we can move away from this one if you're okay, Councillor. I think we're getting the same point. It's just a little bit broader. And I think the next piece, so we'll make sure that let's make sure that with the current sort of conditions are being met is something that's articulated elsewhere that captures this. So we can just strike that one. I think that item 8 basically is speaking to our previous ask around having some housing legacy here, and disappointed in not seeing that at this point. Again, we're not necessarily going to articulate it exactly as written, but this is a point that's been made before. I think it's worthwhile making again. So I'm going to say including this is okay. Is there anyone? I don't see. I'm looking for waving hands of protest here. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to, and I had something similar, but I think we should ask the EAO to consider requiring permanent housing investment plans. I took out some of my previous more specific asks around level, but going back to the EAO 2020 submission, we are very explicit. We sent them, here's stuff we sent you during the application. Since 2013, we've been doing policy, we have data, we have analysis. So it's not just the community, the district has underscore this is really important. And so I think that the EAO should say, hey, consider holding these folks to account to permanent housing to some degree.
Okay. Are we going to get to that feedback? Is that something that we have as we scroll through this list? So let's leave it in there. Again, maybe we can do a hybrid of the two. We know the issue. I think having an ask in there makes sense. We don't want to say that we don't want to walk away from that, and reiterating something that's previously been stated makes a lot of sense to me. It's still relevant. Bullet 9. How does everyone feel about bullet 9? Councillor Hamilton?
I think that our community did consent to a project on that site through our zoning bylaws. This site is zoned for oil and gas export, so I think that's the point at which we gave away our moment to oppose.
Councillor Greenlaw?
With all due respect, our community has never been given an opportunity to consent to an LNG project being put in our backyard in a time of climate change when 89% of the people are asking their governments to do more about climate change. So no, I don't think we have been given the opportunity to consent to it. And we have no regulatory authority over the entire project, which to me is shocking.
Councillor Stoner?
Well, I fully appreciate where my council colleague is coming from and the frustration that I do share with her. I don't think that this is, I don't think that we should include this in our feedback to the EAO as presented.
Thank you. I think, I also think that although it's an important point, I think that this could, I don't think that it lives here. I think it lives in feedback around the engagements being challenging and or ineffective and so on, where there's not a referendum on these things. It's not anyways, I don't think it's appropriate to put it here. I think it weakens our feedback on the other points with this piece. So I'd be in favor of removing it. Is there anyone that well, I know Councillor Greenlaw would like this point included. Is there anyone else that feels strongly that this should be included? Councillor Pettingill. Okay, we do. I'm trying to get us to vote on a whole package.
I would say I actually am quite supportive, but in the interest of moving things forward and seeing where my colleagues are and hoping that we can, where we're able to compromise on some of the other things we've talked about, I would feel comfortable with taking this out. Okay. In the broader context.
Okay, so we're going to strike that. I think my next on this list as we scroll through, my comments around the gender cultural safety plan. I think we already agreed that could be included. So we'll go back up to the top for Councillor Stoner's bit.
Need to do a screen change here quickly.
Okay.
While we're waiting. Because I had 4 more points. 2 have been maybe duplicated. So I don't know if we sort of already discussed them. 2 I was proposing was 1, the amendment approval should clarify, or any amendment approval should clarify that the proponent must adhere to all local government regulations. And it's just there's been so much discussion and confusion and claims back and forth. Like, this is an opportunity to provide clarity on.
Yep, no, that makes sense.
Okay, and then the other one, which they generate some discussion, but I think in terms of the MOU, in particular today, that any project operations and certificate amendments are dependent on First Nations assessment and regulation. Any provincial economic benefit agreements that make the return of lands conditional on project or plan support or non-opposition should be rescinded and or waived. And my rationale here is that a lot of the justification and support for this floatel element is more broad than just the floatel, but a lot of it is contingent on Squamish Nation's regulatory ability and feedback and so on. And these economic benefit agreements have tied Squamish Nation's hands, and it's a practice that the province is doing frequently, and I think it's worthwhile commenting on.
Okay. I'm going to come back to that last point. We do have the local reinforcing that the project needs to comply with all regulatory bodies, including local government. I think everyone agrees on that point. I want to make sure that it's captured. Did you, sorry, we just spoke on that one while you were asked for a timeout to switch screens.
So Councillor Pettengill's comments are here.
Okay.
If you want to.
Yeah, sure.
Or we kind of set our maybe duplicates as maybe a finer point on some of the things I think we agreed to. 2 and 3 are the ones I just raised now.
Okay, so let's, and I'm okay with some duplication. If everyone's okay with that, we'll put them together and it makes it stronger rather than getting to. So amendment approval should clarify that a proposal must appear to all local government regulations. I'd say all other regulators, including local government. Just to, again, should be implied. I'm not comfortable wading into bullet point 3 at this point. I understand that. I think that working with the nation to understand what this means and is makes sense. And I think, and it doesn't sit well with me. I have discomfort with that process that's been used, but at the same time, I'm not comfortable commenting in this way on it at this point. So I would like to exclude bullet point 3. Is everyone okay with that? I guess it's a tough one, but I feel like we could spend some more focused time directly on this bullet point, and maybe it's an advocacy thing to the province broadly or something like that. If we arrive at something that we can really run with, I'm really hesitant about this at this time with the amount of time and space and research we've been able to execute into it, which has been limited or varied, at least amongst the group. So I would like to exclude bullet point 3 from this process, but I don't want to lose that, Councillor Pettingill. So perhaps we can figure out how to better address that, but I'm concerned about that here. So if we can move that, so we can remove bullet point 4 as labeled there. Yes, there you go. And then that other duplicate point is fine. We'll it'll give us some more material to work with. Is that the bottom of our list? And we can go back up to Councillor Stoner's. I want to leave us at least 15 minutes for lunch. I know. Yep, that's fine. Thank you. So, can you just go, sorry, I'm having a, it's better on my screen. Oh, there we go. Okay, so clarification or confirmation, clarification on, so first bullet point is confirmation, just getting them to restate what it is. I don't see that being controversial. I'm looking for body language here. Clarification on the project lifespan. We're seeing 2 different numbers. Use the right number to do the work. Set. Councillor Finch isn't supportive of this. Is anyone else? I think there's a discrepancy, so I'm supportive of it being in there. We're not having a preference to one or the other. It's like, hey, which number and is it being intentional? We're seeing a discrepancy, so that's why I'm comfortable with it. I'm not, rather than just calling it out. There's no interest from Councillor French. I'm not seeing any other around the table, so we'll keep moving there. Oh yeah, Councillor. Hold on, you need to use your mic.
It's the same thing as asking the government for confirmation that the Squamish Nation's tree farm license AAC is X. It's irrelevant. I just don't see the importance.
Well, I think in relation to this, they're looking at an amendment that cites a different time frame than a different amendment or than a different process cited, and they're being compared against that. So I do think that some clarity here, and regardless of what the actual is, it should be judged on an appropriate lifespan, in my opinion. So that's why I want to have it included. And we know that business realities could change the lifespan either way. It's about what it's being judged against in an assessment process that we're commenting on. Do you want to take a swing at this?
Sure. Well, just project lifespan to me is a technical term. And I just don't feel like straying into this technical term, project lifespan, and then attaching numbers from our end is an effective use of space in this letter.
So, and I'm hearing general support for inclusion, and we are asking for, I know it's a technical term. They've used the same technical term and attached two different numbers in different places in the process. So I think asking for some clarity and then pursuing, and who knows if that changes anything, but I do think it's a discrepancy. So I think we've got a majority there. The next point is local economic and labor impacts of doubling the workforce. Okay. And then the engagement feedback windows continue to be insufficient. Okay. Restating that that the Floatel 1 is currently operating without appropriate local permit and why. Let's see, no, and then the discussion around the diesel generators. The concerns there, it was a condition of the previous permit. Again, no, I don't see any issues there. And then investigate and enforce the use of local hotels and accommodation by the proponent. So I think we have that. So now I don't see, so now we've got the suite. We've gone around the table and generally approved it. So now I will move both recommendations that contain everything we've already approved by straw poll. And Councillor Stoner seconds that. I'd like to thank my council colleagues. I know these are challenging conversations, and the subject is just, it's big and it's broad, and it comes with a lot of history. I've also found that there were some pieces here that, you know, reading through the application, there's a section that sort of sets the context for the amendment. And it said, oh, well, in the early days of planning this, it was thought that the community that enough accommodation and enough workforce existed in the community to address this project, which we also know is these are concerns that we've raised since sort of the early idea of this project. And I say we, that predates everybody at this table. So, but here we are dealing with it at this point, and I think we've had a robust discussion here and got to some meaningful feedback that I'll work with staff to get that letter out to be included in this process based on your feedback today. And thank you for the trust to give that broad direction and some room to wordsmith and link it all together. I'll go to Councillor Stoner as a seconder. I'll go to you, Councillor Pettingill.
No comments on this time. Thanks for the work.
Thank you. Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, I'd like to thank my colleagues. It is a tough topic, and I think we handled it well, effectively. Watching back to 2020, back in COVID times discussion we had, that was a long discussion. I do wonder, you know, we did put a lot more of the capacity funding into analyzing some of these things. We have since changed. I think that's worth a little bit of consideration. Again, putting this in context, this is a multi-billion-dollar project. It has massive impacts from GHGs to all kinds of things. And so as challenging as it is, I think it is worth some attention. And so I'm not going to get into that further now. I think we've done a good job today, but I think it's important that we keep up at it on the staff side as well. And you know, if we need to review and clarify the capacity funding piece, I think that may be important. But thank all my colleagues for this discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Finch.
Thanks, Mayor Herford. A few minutes ago, I was contemplating just voting against sending a letter, but the last couple of minutes, I've moved from feeling like this conversation was just disjointed and all over the place to at least somewhat focused. So I support almost everything that we've got up there and we've heard in this discussion. And Mayor Herford, I've done this before. I'm going to do it again because you've proven that with letters like this, you do an excellent job of capturing what's been said and what the feeling is amongst this group. And I have full faith you'll do that again with this letter. And we'll just add that not everyone is opposed to this project, not everyone in Squamish. And we'll remind everybody that this construction project has been ongoing since the summer of 2023. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Go ahead, Councillor Stoner.
I do have comments, and I'll keep them snappy. And I think this is just important for our community to know that this isn't about approving or not approving or supporting or not supporting the project. It's about ensuring that the project is held to a high bar and that the province is holding a high bar for the proponents that are operating in our backyard. And so that's why I think it's important for us as a council, on behalf of our community, to submit feedback to the EAO when it's requested of us. Thank you.
Okay, so I will call the question, and this is on both points, the suite of things we approved through straw poll and bullet point 2, which is directing staff to incorporate that feedback and to work on the TAC, Technical Advisory Committee. So I will call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. I am looking for a motion to terminate from Councillor Hamilton, second by Councillor Stoner. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Good night.